as part of this, you did a lot of fascinating things. One of the things you did, you talked about creating synthetic people, meaning creating fake identities. What does it take to do that? To do that well?
So your credit profile is made up of your name, date of birth, your address, and your social security number.
Mhm.
And those are the kind of, and then there's other things, where you work, that sort of thing. But what people don't realize is there's so many people out there that think that the credit bureaus already know who you are,
Mhm.
right? But the truth is, the first time the credit bureau has ever heard about you was when you told them. The first time you applied for a credit card, they created a credit profile at that moment. Prior to that, they had no idea. So the first time you apply, you give them your full name, date of birth, social security number, and your address. And they create a credit profile, and they say, hey, no record found of this person. He has no credit, nothing, probably got denied. Well, what I realized through the course of, because eventually I ended up leaving that one company and I opened my own mortgage company.
Mhm.
When I opened that mortgage company, I was on the inside. Does that make sense? Like I wasn't just a broker that was sitting out with everybody else and would periodically come in and ask questions or would call underwriting but really didn't understand what was happening and what the underwriting guidelines were. Now I was actually talking to the underwriters, and you're talking to the owners of the lending institutions and the banks, and you're talking to all of the account executives. And now it wasn't just Eagle Lending I was talking to. There were 40 different account executives coming in on a weekly basis trying to get us to sign up with their lender.
Mhm.
And they're on the inside telling you, coming in, showing you programs and saying, look, if your borrower is, self-employed,
Mhm.
we don't ask for this or this. We just ask for them to say they're self-employed, like liar loans. You've heard the term liar loans?
No.
Okay. Or no doc loans, where they don't ask for any documentation. If he's got over, like, let's say a 700 credit score and he says he's been a plumber and he works for himself, then he's got over a 700 credit score. He just has to say he's worked for himself for over 2 years, and
They don't ask any
they
other
don't ask for
questions.
any documentation. He's got the money in the bank. He's got a 700 credit score. Says he's been on the job for 2 years. He's self-employed. We're going to raise his interest rate by 1%. And he's got, and that's it. He's got the loan. So, but you start to know how things work, because I hired a bunch of brokers to work underneath me, and when they would get caught, I would get the phone call. So I get the phone call from the owner of a bank or a lending institute, a lender, and that lender says, "Hey, Matt, we got a problem." I'm like, "What's up?" He's like, "Listen, we caught a fake W-2." I'm like, "What do you mean?" "Yeah, your broker so and so sent us a file, and this person there's 2 fake W-2s, and we're assuming the pay stubs are fake." And I'm like, "Are you serious? How did you even catch that?" And they go, "Oh, well, here's what we did. We checked with sunbiz.com, sunbiz.gov, which is the Secretary of State's website that registers corporations. And we checked, and the tax ID number didn't match. And now I know every W-2 has to have a matching tax ID number for whatever corporation issued it."
So there's a sequence of checks they do to detect fraud on different documents like W-2s.
Right.
And then you're slowly learning.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the process for detecting?
I mean, I had a pretty good understanding anyway.
Yeah.
But so I'm starting
Just
to learn
common
that.
sense understanding, yeah.
So I'm putting these things together. And I remember one time I had a woman come in, and she came in and she had perfect credit. She had like 750 credit scores. I mean, it was perfect. And she came in, and one of the brokers came in and said, "Hey, man," he's like, "Can I show you something?" I was like, "Yeah, what's up?" He goes, "Look," he said, "I've got this woman's W-2s here." I said, "Okay." I looked at him, and he goes, "Here's your credit report." And he goes, "Here's the application. This is the social security number." I went, "All right." And he said, "This is the social security number on the W-2." And I went, "Okay." Keep in mind, you go to get a car loan or credit card, they never ask for these things. So, and he was like, and I'm really shocked he even noticed it. I probably might not have even caught it, but they were different. And I went, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah." He said, "So I did, she just brought him in, she's here." And I was like, "Oh, bring her in here. So she came in, sat down. I said, listen, here's what we just found. And she was like, oh, okay, you know what? I don't want the loan. I go, no. I said, listen, you're getting the loan.
Mhm.
You got a 750 credit score. Like, I don't care what we have to do. We're getting you the loan. I just want to know what's going on. How did you get 750 credit scores under this social security number when clearly this is your real social security number? You've been working for this company for 10 years. And your credit profile says it's only like 3 years old. And I was like, what happened? And what she told me she did was she went through a divorce. She had been married for 10 years, used her his surname for 10 years. So she has no credit under her maiden name. But when they got divorced, she switched to her maiden name. Because when she tried to get anything in her husband's surname, it was denied. Bad credit. So he had bad credit. Their credit went bad. So she switched to her name. And a friend told her if she needed to get her electric or anything turned on, she could use her name and use her daughter's or son's social security number, which was like a 4-year-old kid.
Yep.
So she used that and it went through. She had to put a deposit down, but it went through at least. Wasn't denied. So that went through. Then she went and she applied for an apartment with that. Sure enough, it went through. She had no credit, but they said, you don't have bad credit. So she said once she moved into the apartment, she then started getting these pre-approved credit cards. So she goes, but I knew I had applied there using my son's social security number, let's say. So she started filling those out. And sure enough, she got a credit card. And then she got 2. And then she got a pre-approval from Ford Motor Credit. She went and got herself a new car. Got approved. She'd been making the payments ever since. She has 750 credit scores. She thought she'd try her hand at buying a house in his name, in his social security number. And we caught it. And she got a house in that name. We closed it. I just was like, wow, like this is great.
Can I ask you a question about that? Because it seems like she's able to pay for everything.
Right.
So while this is highly illegal, is it unethical? Is it like it's unethical in that it's messing with the system on which a lot of people rely? But it feels like there's some aspect of the system that's broken in that it doesn't give people like her a second chance.
She could have claimed bankruptcy. And then 2 years later, listen, 2 years out of bankruptcy, you can go into Bank of America and get a conventional mortgage, assuming you have perfect credit outside the bankruptcy. You have the down payment. You make enough money. There's a whole bunch of, a bunch of underwriting guidelines you have to meet, but that's possible. But you're right. For instance, she wasn't getting an apartment with her bad credit. She wasn't getting her utilities turned on. She wasn't getting any of those things done.
So getting your life back on track is just harder.
It's extremely hard.
So there's a temptation to take the shortcut, and the shortcut is often going to be illegal.
Right. And she stumbled into it.
Yeah,
but
right.
she basically explained it to me. And I don't think she had walked out of my brokerage office before I went, and I just started making up, names. And I think I went and into our file cabinet and grabbed some people's 1040s, which we had, their tax returns, and looked up children's social security numbers and just grabbed some random kids' social security numbers and their name and went and pulled them. But I changed their date of birth to be an adult, pulled it. And sure enough, it came up, no file found. It didn't say fraud alert or fraud or anything. It didn't say mismatched this, mismatched that. It didn't say anything. It just said, no file found. Well, then we went and applied for a couple credit cards using a child's social security number. And then we went and pulled our own credit report. And sure enough, it didn't say no file found. It just said that there had been 2 inquiries applying for credit cards. So I was like, oh, wow, like that's a credit profile. So that turns into me going to Social Security and calling Social Security and trying to get them to issue me Social Security numbers to adults that had never had a Social Security number issued to them. I need to get Social Security number to give me a clean Social Security number. But I called up, and of course, I'm a novice. I don't really know what I'm doing. So I call up and I say, hey, I'm never had a Social Security number issued. And they were like, how old are you? And I was like, I'm 31 years old, and they were, Yeah, that's not possible. Do you have a driver's license? Yeah. You have a bank account? Yeah. You have a social security number. Bring your driver's license in and we'll pull it up. Okay, well, that's not going to happen. Hang up. Call back. Hi, my son is 7 years old or 3 years old, and he had never had a social security number issued. Oh, okay. Was he born in a hospital? Yes. Well, he has one. He has one. Go ahead and get your son. Come in here. No, I'm not doing that. Hang up. Call back. So I called back probably 10 times. And eventually, someone said, I kept altering it, kept altering what I was saying. Till I got to the point where I was saying, my son was born with a midwife, not in a hospital. And the pediatrician told us that we needed to get Social Security to issue a Social Security number. And they would say, well, he should have issued it, but that does happen sometimes. So bring your son in and you can fill out the paperwork. We'll have one issued. First we'll check to see he never had one issued. And if he hasn't, we'll issue one. And so then it turned into, my son is out of the country and I need this. And then that turned into, oh, I'm sorry. Well, how old is he? I was like, he's 3. And they go, well, I'm sorry. If he's over the age of 12 months old, he has to come in. Hang up the phone, call back. My son is 10 months old. He's out of the country, born with a midwife, never had a social security number. And then they go, oh, okay, that's fine. Just get his birth certificate and his shot record, and you can come in, fill out the paperwork. We'll issue you a social security number. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. So I figured out how to create a birth certificate. I ordered the security paper, when where you make a copy, it says, void if copied. Mm-hmm. So I had to order a bunch of that. And I went online and figured out how to make a fake birth certificate. It was great too, because the county actually, they give you a blank form and then they actually show you what it looks like filled out, like a handwritten one filled out. So I knew if he was born this day, he got these shots. 2 months later, he got these shots. Mm-hmm. 6 months later, he got these shots. So I just filled it out. I even had to order a seal. So you have to have a seal that says Hillsborough County vital statistics or Richland County vital statistics or something. And I couldn't get anybody to make that. So I changed it to Richland County Office of Virtual Records. And then I took 220 grit sandpaper and hit it over and over and over again to wear it down. And then I did the embossment on the corner. And, I printed it on the security paper, embossed it. Nobody looks at those things. You could see Richland County, you could kind of see that. And really, they just grab it and they go like this. This is what you realize when I started getting driver's licenses issued by the state DMV, right? The state, I figured out eventually it was easier to just go into the DMV and have them give me a driver's license than actually make one. So, but you notice they would just grab the thing, they'd feel the form and go, okay. They don't even look at it. So, which is upsetting if you put as much work into these documents as I am, for them to go, okay, yeah, that's good. Sit over there. I felt like going hey, bro, take a look at this. This is artwork.
Yeah. But they're looking for the low-hanging fruit of crappy fraud.
Right. Yeah. This stuff was right through. So.
Okay. So birth certificate gets you a social security number. So it's interesting because you've done a lot of different approaches to creating synthetic people. There's homeless people involved. So sometimes it's grounded in real people or real names. And then you're
right.
Some part is fake, some part is real sometimes. And sometimes it's completely all fake. Right.
Because now I have the name, I have the social security number. And what's great is they mail you. What's even better is you get to pick whatever name you want. Mm-hmm. Because when you pick your child's name, he doesn't even have to have your last name. Mm-hmm. You pick any name. So I would pick a name and I'd just say, oh, my wife's last name is this. If they questioned it, which they never did. But, I've got a social security number, and then I would go apply for credit cards. And I'd get denied, of course. But they would all offer me a secured credit card. So I'd then fill out the secured credit card and I'd send the bank the money, and they would give me a secured credit card for $500, $300, $1,000, whatever it was. And then once you start making the payments, I pulled the credit, and a credit profile shows up saying that this 31-year-old man with a social security number that I know was issued, a couple months ago, has three credit cards. They don't even say secured. They just say there's like, this credit card is $500. It was issued by Bank of America. This one was issued by Capital One. This one was, so I've got 3 of them, but I had no credit scores. So at that point, I kind of kicked back and waited. I just kept making payments. And I remember thinking to myself, I'll bet you that the credit bureaus don't generate credit scores for at least a year. And I was like, God, this is going to be a year-long process. And while that was happening, I was starting other ones, because I figured at least in a year I'll have a bunch of these we call them like phantom borrowers, but now they call them synthetic identities. So at least I would have these synthetic identities, and maybe I could do something with them. But what happened was, at 6 months, I went and I randomly pulled the guy's credit, the person's credit, and they had 705 credit scores, 705, 701, 695. I was like, oh my God, you only needed a 620 to get a 95% loan from the bank. So I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Sure enough, a month later, the other ones I had started, all of them, bam, bam, bam.
So what do you do with a phantom borrower? Like how do you make money on this?
So I think most people, if you were just like a scammer or a fraudster, you would probably just get credit cards and maybe build up that history, or maybe try and borrow a personal loan, which is limited. It's personal loans used to be you could go to an FDIC insured bank, which borrows money. Those, the personal loans they lend out at the max $15,000, so you could do that.
So you can go through this whole process of creating a fake identity, getting a card, paying it off, building up credit, and then you get $15,000 at the end. Or
right.
something.
You get 15, maybe, if you want to keep making the payments, if you could wait a year, you could probably get 15,000. Maybe you could get 20, 30,000, and a bunch of little smaller ones, you get 7,500. Because I did there was $7,500 from Citibank, $5,500 from American General. So you maybe get 25,000, maybe 30,000 in personal loans. Maybe you could then apply for, maybe get another 20 or 30,000 in regular credit cards, 10,000 here, 8,000, 5,000. And then you go to the lower department store cards, and you go to Home Depot, you get 1,000, you get 500. So it ends up being, maybe you can get 50, 60,000. Maybe if you're really good, you could get up to 80 or $100,000 in credit cards and personal loans, if you really knew what you were doing. But
per person, per identity.
But I had the ability to leverage those perfect credit profiles against properties. And I mean, ultimately, that's what I end up doing. And so each one of those identities was worth, a few million.
Can you explain how that works? So to leverage them against property. So how does that work with a mortgage?
So what I did eventually, I mean, this is down the road, but, at this point, when things are just, my whole life had kind of gone off the rails, I was on federal probation. And so what I decided I was going to do was start running a scam, a much larger scam. And what I was going to do was, I was going to start flipping properties, right? Like buy houses cheap, fix them up and sell them. There's an area of Tampa called Ybor City. So I was going to start flipping houses in Ybor City. And, I thought, okay, I can buy these houses for, you could buy a really crappy house at that time for $50,000, $60,000. Let's say 50. And then you could put $25,000 into it in renovations. You could renovate it for 25, and maybe you could get an appraisal for 100. So I thought what I could do is I can buy these houses, renovate them, and sell them to, regular people. But I also had been working on the synthetic identities. And then I thought, well, or I could just sell them to synthetic identities. And then I wouldn't have to dump 25,000 into it, right? And these guys are perfect. They have perfect credit. I can provide W-2s and pay stubs, because by this point, I'm manufacturing businesses. So I've incorporated businesses. I've got websites for the businesses, W-2s, pay stubs. So these guys look perfect. So I figure I'll buy these properties for 50,000, sell it to these guys for 100. Maybe I'll pocket 40 or 50,000. I don't really have to do anything. But that seems short-sighted. So I thought what'd be even better is that if I did a little bit of renovations and then I sold it for much higher, maybe I put 10,000, clean up the outside of it, because these guys don't care what the inside of the property looks like. They don't exist. So, and then but I can't, how am I going to get an appraisal for $100,000? Well, do you know how appraisals work? Okay. So the bank sends an appraiser out, or at that time you could provide an appraisal. They can review it. So they'll do what's called a desktop review. They review it on the computer. They never go out to the property, or they send someone out. They call that, it's like a field review. They send someone out and they just look at the house. They don't go in it though. So I have to clean up the outside of the house. So what I did was, but the problem is if you're trying to sell that house for, let's say, 200,000, the other houses, they have to pick 3 comparable sales in the area that are also going to support a $200,000 sales price. Well, there's no other houses selling for 200,000 near this house. So I thought, if I want to get these things appraised for 200, 250,000, I have to have comparable sales. And that appraisal is going to be reviewed. So what I did was I went out and I bought this house for 50,000, and I recorded the sale at 200,000. So when you buy a house for $100,000, you pay $700 in doc stamps. But if you pay an extra $700, the sale shows up for 200,000. Well, I'm buying these things for 50, so I'm paying $350, and I'm just paying an extra $1,050. So it ends up being $1,400, but the sale shows up at 200,000 on a house that's a crack house I bought for $50,000. Now I trim the trees, we mow the yard, we clean up the porch, we put the porch rail on, maybe we paint it real nice, we black out all the windows. You can't see inside, but from the curb it looks great. And I get an appraisal. So I do that with that house. I do that with another house, all within a mile. So I buy 4 houses, knowing I could use there's a subject and 3 comparables for all of them. So the first thing I did is I bought 4 houses for 50,000, 60,000, 40,000, and I recorded the values at 210, 200, 190. So I get an appraiser to come out there. He appraises it. He says it's horrible, but there's comparables here. Now, of course, it is in bad shape, and he says it's in bad shape, but I go ahead and I correct all that. So I correct it. So now if you review the appraisal and you're in California, or even if you drive your car down, the appraiser comes to the house and looks at it from the street, it looks fine. But the truth is, I've got $60,000 into this property and you're appraising it for $200,000. So the bank's rated they're not going to lend 200, but they'll lend 190. So the bank is ready to lend this synthetic borrower $190,000 on a house that I have $60,000 in. So I schedule a closing, and we close on the house, and I walk away with $60,000. And the thing is, like, the problem is by the time I got to this point, I knew so many people in the industry. Nobody had to really at that point show up. Although I've had people show up for the synthetic identities and sign for them. Almost all the closings, nobody ever showed up. I just showed up and said to the title agency and said, "Hey, my borrower, he's at work right now. He can't make it. Can I just take the file and I'll have him sign all the documents at his work and I'll bring him back. He's like an hour and a half away from here. I'll be back in 2 or 3 hours." And they're like, "Oh, wow. Matt, thank you so much." And they would give it to me, and I'd go sit in the parking lot and I'd sign all the documents. I'd wait an hour or 2 and I'd come back in and say, "Here you go."
How were you able to keep all this in your mind? Because you have to not slip up in any of these conversations.
It's pretty easy for me to for me to keep them everything in the correct category. Does that make sense? Like it's I'm not great at a lot of things, but this I was very good at.
But well, there's these phantom people that exist, and they were becoming real people in your mind. Isn't like you're able to tell good stories with those people, right? Like, because if you're talking to the appraiser, if you're talking to the everybody involved.
Well, keep in mind the appraiser almost never meets the borrower. Never, not even almost, like 99.9999% of the time they never meet them.
But you have to talk about them.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm asking is, you're able to converse fluently about these synthetic identities.
Yeah, they all had different jobs. They all had all the jobs were basically, they were all on the job for 5 years. They were all, it was a lot of it was,
there's a template.
Yeah, exactly. But
I got it.
Yeah, listen, matter of fact, almost every one of them had the same birth date, you know? So because who knows? It wasn't difficult. And keep in mind, a lot of the brokers barely ever meet the borrower. They call in on the phone, but it didn't matter anyway, because I'm walking in saying, I got a slam dunk deal for you. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, wow, Matt, you got the W-2s, the pay stubs, you got all their rental history. You have everything done. It's perfect. Thank you so much. They're happy to do it. Hey, I print up the docs and I'll have them go sign it. Great. Wow. Thank you. Assuming they didn't already know about it. And almost everybody involved in this, by the time I was done, was involved. There's probably 15 or 20 people that all knew what was going on.
The full of it. They knew the full depth of it.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe not 100% everything, but they definitely knew this is fraud.
And then we're still going along with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep in mind that even when, I give you an example. One of my, let's say, and this happened with almost all of them, was he would buy 5 houses. So the guy bought, what happens, the basic design was, I buy the houses, I record the values higher, and this person buys all 5 houses, refinances them. He ends up borrowing a little bit over $1 million in his name. Then, of course, I go and I get personal loans from several banks. I get credit cards. I run up all of his credit cards. By this point, I've got $10,000, $20,000 worth of credit cards in the guy's name. So the guys are all worth like $1 million and change. Well, once I stop paying, you start getting letters from the collection companies, right? From the banks, and then they sell them off. So after about 3 months, you're getting tons of letters. And what I would do is I would take my borrower's name, I would go online and I would find, or I'd go in the newspaper and I would find an article about, let's say, like a 12-car pileup. Mm-hmm. So there's a huge accident on I-4. It's very dangerous. So there's a 12-car pileup, and someone in the accident was life flighted to Tampa General Hospital. Mm-hmm. I would cut and paste that article, and I would just insert my borrower's name into the article saying that, Brandon Green was life flighted to Tampa General Hospital, is currently in critical condition. I would then print that article out on newsprint. I'd then make a copy cut it up, make a copy of the newsprint, highlight his name, and I would write a letter from Brandon Green's fictional sister to the collection companies saying, several months ago, my brother was in a horrible car accident. He is currently, they've got the article, they have the highlighted name. He clearly was in this accident. He is currently in a coma, and the doctors say even if he wakes up from the coma, he will never work again. That, so you might as well just foreclose on, stop writing us letters and take the houses back. And that's all they're looking for is a reason. At this point, even if they look into Brandon Green, they can't figure out if he's a real person or not. Because he's got a social security number. And everything went bad at the same time. He's got multiple rental properties or his primary residence. All of his credit cards went bad. Everything went bad. We have an excuse. We have a letter. That happens. People get divorced. They lose their job. They get in accidents. It's reasonable.
When they look into it, it all looks legitimate.
Even if they ordered another appraisal. By this point, it's not 4 comparable sales or 3 or 4 comparable sales. By this point, it's like 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 because I kept making more and more of these guys.
What was your, just almost like a tangent, what's your thinking process? There's a lot of cleverness going on here. So like the car pileup as a solution, newspaper, and you mail it. What, are you sitting there alone and thinking through this? Like, how do you come up with that idea? It's a very interesting, a very clever, innovative idea.
So at first I thought about making like a fake death certificate.
Mm-hmm.
He died, but I thought, I don't know, like what if, like some of these places had like, primary mortgage insurance. Like what if the primary mortgage insurance, like what if they try and claim because he was dead, or like, I don't know that side. So I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to do something that's semi-verifiable and third parties, like a third party telling you this is what happened. I thought, well, like the newspaper, and or do I claim bankruptcy? And I've done that. I've gone and got the bankruptcy forms, right? You can go to the bankruptcy court and they'll give you forms to mail to all of your creditors, and you mail them. They stop contacting you. They wait to be located by or notified by the bankruptcy court. But my fear there is, nobody's ever going to notify them. Like I'm not going through bankruptcy for one of these guys. So it was like, this is a better bet than just writing a letter saying, I'm going through a divorce. My wife's keeping those houses. That's her problem. You could do, there's lots of things you could do, but to me, this was, they're not going to try. How do you shut it down without him dying? How do you shut that down? This is how you shut it down. He's in a coma. He'll never work again. He was in a car accident. Here's the proof. He can't even write you, I'm his sister. I wrote you the letter.
It's a one-time letter that seems to tie up all the
exactly.
loose ends.
Exactly. I don't know exactly how that, what sparked that is, as much as there were so many other avenues that I could have gone that I just didn't know.
But you were thinking through all those different avenues.
Yeah.
Are you mostly thinking alone?
I mean, I had guys that I was bouncing ideas off of. There were other guys that were involved in the scam. Everybody, I think that scam ended up making like, I think the FBI said, it was like 11.5 million or something. And, but there were so many other people that were involved in that scam that were, this guy's getting 50, this guy's getting 20, 17,000, 20,000, 25,000. And, we're just doing it constantly. And so the bank would foreclose on that property. They'd take it back. They'd put it back on the MLS. They put it back on the MLS for 200,000. It wouldn't sell. Then they drop it to, 150, wouldn't sell. Then they drop it to 125, 130, wouldn't sell. They drop it to 90, and somebody buy it for like 90. It wasn't worth 90. But by that point, that whole area we'd done so many houses at that point, the whole area shot up. And the FBI said we did 109 houses. I don't think that's true. But
wow.
we when I end up leaving Tampa after that scam falls apart and the FBI shows up, Forbes came out with an article, 6 months later, and they said that the Ybor City zip code was one of the top 20 fastest growing appraising areas in the country. Mm-hmm. And, everybody was like, oh, that's mad because this place is a dump. Like this is a horrible place. Like this is, and I remember one time I had talked to a guy, years later, and he was like, oh, all the comparable sales have dried up. Like when you left, there was just nothing even close to 200,000.